Recording in progress.
Good morning. We're just going to give a few seconds for our attendees to join the meeting, and then we'll get started. The September 11th, 2025 Federal Freedom of Information Act Advisory Committee meeting. I'm Kirsten Mitchell, this committee's designated federal officer. Please note that this meeting is virtual and is being recorded. I am confirming that we have a quorum with 15 members present in accordance with the committee's bylaws. Please be advised that Margaret Quokka will be joining us around 10:20 a.m. Because this is a public meeting, we ask members to keep their cameras on, but I want to note that Nieva Brock is unable to have her camera on this morning. We are once again using a new to us virtual meeting platform, so we ask for your patience as we navigate on this newer platform. Thank you to the audiovisual team at the National Archives for live streaming this meeting on the National Archives YouTube channel, where it is being broadcast with a slight delay. NARA AV team, thank you for your behind-the-scenes support. Thank you also to Dan Levinson, an alternate designated federal officer who is also joining us today. And with that, I now turn the meeting over to Jay Traynor, Chief Operating Officer for the National Archives and Records Administration. Jay, over to you.
Thank you, Kirsten. Good morning. I am Jay Traynor, Chief Operating Officer here at the National Archives and Records Administration. Welcome to our fall meeting of the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA Advisory Committee. This committee exists to foster dialogue between federal government FOIA professionals and the requester community and allows members to study, deliberate, and recommend ways to improve FOIA administration. 1 year into the committee's 2-year term, I am pleased to report that much study and deliberation has already occurred, and as we will hear today, several recommendations are taking shape. Each day at agencies across the government, FOIA professionals work to fulfill the more than 1 million FOIA requests that are sent to federal departments and agencies. An efficient and effective FOIA process relies on many factors to succeed: good records management, excellent leadership, and sound management among them. But the process also relies on trust between those who process FOIA requests and those who make the request. Trust in the government has increased since last year. According to the nonpartisan Partnership for Public Service, 33% of Americans surveyed said they trusted the government in 2025, up 10 percentage points from 2024. Much work remains, but each interaction between a FOIA professional and a requester, whether an email, a letter, or a phone call, offers an opportunity to build this trust even more. Each and every day, NARA's Office of Government Information Services, OGIS, works to build trust in the FOIA process by working with agencies and requesters to help prevent and resolve disputes and by reviewing FOIA compliance. Earlier this week, OGIS marked its 16th anniversary as the FOIA Ombuds. Before turning the meeting over to Committee Chairperson Alina Simo, I want to acknowledge today's date, the 24th anniversary of the attacks of September 11th, 2001. The horrific events that attacked our nation's collective security and freedom also sparked countless FOIA requests to agencies large and small across our government. Nearly a quarter of a century later, those FOIA requests remind us of the importance of records to our nation's collective history and fabric. I now turn the meeting over to Alina.
Thank you, Jay. Really appreciate your remarks and thank you for joining us today. And Kirsten, thank you for all the preliminary work and all the behind the scenes work you've been doing. Good morning and welcome to everyone who's watching us, both on the NAR YouTube channel and on our Zoom platform. It is also my pleasure to welcome you to the sixth meeting or a fall meeting of the 24 to 26 FOIA Advisory Committee term. Meeting materials, including the agenda for today and slides, are available on the FOIA Advisory Committee page of our OJAS website, www. Reports from each of the three subcommittees today. Those subcommittees are working to examine the challenges arising from the increasing volume and frequency of FOIA requests, develop concrete recommendations for statutory reform of the FOIA, and increase the adoption and implementation of past FOIA Advisory Committee recommendations. But before we hear reports from the subcommittees, we are very excited to welcome today two of our current committee members, David Collier and Shelley Kimball, along with their United Kingdom colleague, Ben Worthy, who are here to share with us their work on vexatious requests. More on that in 1 minute. I just want to make sure we get through some housekeeping notes first. I also want to commend all three subcommittees and all of their working groups who have been meeting regularly since our last meeting on June 12th. I want to express my gratitude for all the hard work that the committee members have done, put in thus far, and I am very much looking forward to hearing the report outs today. So some housekeeping notes before we launch into our meeting agenda. Let's see. This meeting is public in accordance with the Federal Advisory Committee Act, FACA, which requires open access to committee meetings and operations. In accordance with FACA, we have already posted both minutes and transcripts for our March meeting. For our June meeting. And there you will also find committee members' biographies. Please also visit and follow our blog, the FOIA Ombuds. In the past, we have featured individual biographies and Q&As with some of our committee members. I don't think we've captured everyone yet. So if we haven't gotten to you yet, committee member, we will come and get you. During today's meeting, I want to encourage committee members to use the raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen when you wish to speak or ask questions. The raise hand option is even better than using the host and panelist option from the drop-down menu in the chat function when you want to speak or ask a question, but you may also use that function to let me or Kirsten know that you need to step out or you need to walk away from the camera for a more extended period of time. In order to comply with the spirit and intent of the FACA, we ask that you please use the Zoom chat function for housekeeping and procedural matters only. Do not enter any substantive comments in the chat function, as they will not be recorded in the transcript of the meeting. I referenced this earlier. If any committee member needs to take a break, please do not disconnect from the web event. Instead, mute your microphone by using the microphone icon at the bottom of your screen. Turn off your camera by using the camera icon. And please send a quick chat to me and Kirsten to let us know when you'll be back. An important reminder to all committee members and also to myself, because I always forget, please identify yourself by name and affiliation each time you speak. It helps makes the transcript process go much more smoothly. Members of the public who wish to submit written public comments to the committee may do so using our public comments form, which is available at www.archives.gov/OJAS/public-comments. We review all public comments, and if they comply with our public comments posting policy, we post them as soon as we are able. We will have a public comment period at the end of our meeting today. And I want to stress that we will remain flexible with our schedule today and see how the pace is going. If we need it, we could take a short break. I'll poll committee members to see how they're feeling. Or we can continue to muddle through and soldier on and continue without a break, and perhaps we can end a little bit early. But I will ask committee members how they feel. We'll have to take an actual vote on that, I suppose. As we noted in our Federal Register notice announcing this meeting, I just want to remind everyone, public comments will be limited to 3 minutes per individual. So at this time, I am excited to turn to the substantive part of our agenda. Housekeeping notes are over. And I am very pleased to introduce our 3 speakers today. 2 of them are already very familiar to the committee and to folks who are watching us today. David Coulier of the Breckner Center for Freedom of Information at the University of Florida, and Shelley Kimball of Johns Hopkins University. Suzanne Piotrowski at Rutgers University, who unfortunately is not able to join us today. Some quick background on Ben. He is a reader in politics and public policy at Birkbeck College, University of London. I actually had to rely on AI to help me understand what a reader means, and so I'm confessing that. Ben, you'll let me know if AI actually got it right or wrong, but the AI short version is it's a senior academic rank. A reader in politics and public policy in the UK is roughly the US equivalent of a tenured associate professor. So the bottom line from AI is that someone with this title is a high-level research leading scholar in politics and public policy, trusted to shape both the discipline and real-world policy. Ben has written extensively on issues around transparency and freedom of information in the UK and elsewhere, including authoring the book, The Politics of FOI in 2017. He has recently run a 2-year Leverhulme project assessing the impact of voting data platforms and written on open data, lobbying transparency, and local government openness. He is director of the Centre for British Political Life and sits on the UK Open Government Network. So I think we're all in for a treat in listening to today's panel on vexatious requests, mitigating harm to agencies while protecting the flow of civic information. So with that, I will turn things over to David, Shelley, and Ben. Thank you.
Thank you, Alina. Glad to see everybody. I'm Dave Coulier from the University of Florida, and we're excited to talk about this today. And we hope to elicit some ideas, suggestions, responses, because we're not done with our work, and so your input's really valuable. I'm going to run through some PowerPoints. We're going to run through PowerPoints, hopefully around 20 minutes or so, to give a lot of time for discussion and that sort of thing. In the PowerPoints, I'll have links, I'll have QR codes, links to studies we've produced so far that you could tap into if you want. And that file is on the FOIA Advisory Committee website, so you could download it and have it so you don't have to scribble things down or look at your screen. So I'm going to share screen right now and get this going. All right, very cool. So this is a study, as Alina said, the 4 of us are working on. We've been working on for, almost a couple of years now, and we hope to wrap up in June. And the main point is we're trying to figure out, how do we mitigate that disruption of government agencies from what they, different people call different words, vexatious, unduly burdensome, you name it, while at the same time protecting the free flow of information. And, this is an issue that came up a couple of years ago following the several years, particularly in 2022, of folks flooding election offices with public records requests, basically trying to get information to see, was the election stolen or not? And this flood of requests was said to really burden a lot of offices. And so there were efforts to do something about it, including passing laws that would ban vexatious requests, even fine people for doing it. And we were a little concerned about some of these laws just being thrown out there. So we decided, we need to look at what really is the best way to do this. Let's put some thought into it before we just start passing reactionary laws. And this project is funded in part by the Democracy Fund. So they've been helping out because they care about democracy. What we've done in the past time here, we've looked at all the previous research, literature. We've looked at how all the states handle this issue and their laws and their case law. We've looked at public records request logs all around the country, including at the federal level, because of course we're hearing that's an issue at the federal level as well. We participate in a survey of election officials in the US, a survey of records custodians in the UK, interviews, and we've been talking to experts as well on our advisory panel. So we're just a deep dive into this. And so what have we found so far? One, everybody calls it different things, and there are different terms, there's different definitions, it's all over the map. And there are different ways of conceiving vexatiousness. It can be workload, just too much work. It can be overly broad, vague requests. A lot of folks talk about intent, that people are out to bug and harass agencies. And so that's an interesting concept that we'll talk a little bit about. That's an interesting issue. And we also looked at how the states have been handling this. Pretty much everywhere uses fees to a large extent to have large requests go away. They'll say, sure, you want all that information? Well, we'll get it to you, but it'll be $200,000. And that either forces the requester to hone it or walk away. Some states in their laws allow time extensions. Some allow folks to deny or ignore requests that are vague, unreasonable in scope, various terms for it. In Nevada, the term is extraordinary. If a request is extraordinary, then that's an issue. And then we do have in the US a growing interest in the ability for government to fine or ban a requester who's deemed vexatious. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. First, I think it's useful to hear, well, what are we hearing from public officials on this? I think it's I come from the requester side of things, so I think it's important to hear viewpoints on the other side of the counter. So Shelley, can you talk a little bit about this survey that was conducted?
Sure. Thanks, Dave. So a little bit about the methods here. We added a series of quantitative questions to the Reed College Elections and Voting Information Center's local election officials survey. It was fielded in the fall and winter of 2024. And this is a survey that goes to election officials across the country in jurisdictions of a variety of sizes and geographic locations in the U.S. So our goals in these questions were to understand the depth and breadth of this issue, as well as to test a little bit some of the solutions that we were considering to kind of see what local election officials preferred and what they were experiencing. So participants were clear that they are trying to manage more requests than in previous years and that the requests are taking more time to fill. So here you can see that 64% agreed that public records requests are taking more time to fill than they did in 2020. But we also wanted to understand if this is like an iceberg effect, as one scholar put it, where a small amount of requests takes up a large proportion of the burden. So next slide, please, Dave. Thank you. So you can see here, it looks like that's true. 72% said that they strongly agreed or agreed that a few requests disproportionately consume a significant amount of time. Additionally, in another question, 62% reported that unduly burdensome requests significantly impeded their work. Next slide, please, Dave. So here's where we tested some of those solutions. We culled this series of recommendations from the literature, from what we knew from the state analysis, from conversations with the expert panel. And so we asked participants of this survey to rate this list to see what they preferred. So it will be interesting to compare this with some of Ben's work coming up. But what you see here is that they primarily supported charging fees as a way to manage unduly burdensome requests. The other solutions in order were improving technology, educating citizens, training staff, outrightly denying requests, proactively posting material, fining requesters, banning requesters, and increasing staffing levels. Some insights into the interviews explain a bit more of this, is that the interviewees described using fees as a way to test whether the requesters really wanted that information. So if they have a big bill to pay, will they really come get that documentation? Will they really come collect those records? With technology, they saw it more as an integration into some of the other solutions, assuming that it would be an effective way to streamline their processes. In the balance, the highest opposition levels in the survey, meaning those who strongly disagreed, were to those more punitive solutions. So the banning requesters, the fining requesters, those outright denials. But what was really interesting about this particular group of solutions was that those who reported in the survey that those heavy workloads are taking up a disproportionate amount of time, or that their work is being impeded by them, those who are kind of the more stressed about this situation, they were more likely to choose those more punitive solutions. So that gave us a bit of a wide look, but as Dave mentioned, we also explored the solutions developed in the UK. So Ben, I'm going to hand it over to you to explain that part of the work.
Thank you so much, Shelley, and thank you everybody for asking me to be here. So I want to reflect a little bit on what's been happening in the United Kingdom, based on what we know already from various kind of scrutinies and reports about the UK, but also, as Dave said, we did a poll of FOI officers across UK local government and got 81 responses. So the really important thing to know about the UK Freedom of Information Law is that when the law was passed and came into force in 2005, there was a section, as you can see here, 14.1, which said that authorities do not have to comply with the request if the request is vexatious. Just one really important thing to note, it was explicit that it is about the request being vexatious, but not the requester. Now, it becomes a little bit more mysterious when we dig deeper into this. Next slide, please, Dave. So at the time that the law was passed, the law was silent on what exactly vexatious meant. But we can see here that the Information Commissioner in the UK, the first level of appeal, defined it now as a disproportionate, manifestly unjustified, inappropriate or improper use of freedom of information. There was a really important decision from the second level of the appeal system in 2013 around Dransfield, and it said that there were 4 different areas that FOI officers need to think about. The burden being imposed on a public authority, the motive of the requester. Now, this is really interesting, of course, because the Act was explicit that this was about requests and not requesters. The value or serious purpose of the request, again, that kind of hints at motive, and then any harassment or distress to the staff. The ruling was also very clear in that this couldn't be seen as hard and fast rules that covers all authorities, but that each request had to be understood in its own context and history. Next slide, Dave. So the good news first. The good news is that the number of requests labelled vexatious has been very low. For UK central government, the latest figures from 23-24 say that it runs at about 3%. That's actually very high as an average, because when you look across a lot of government departments, it's far, far lower than that. Even better news is for local government level, where most FOI requests go, it's even lower, much lower, we estimate, than 1%. And for the next slide, there's slightly less good news. As is right under a freedom of information regime, the ability to prove and argue for a vexatious request is a very high hurdle. And officials and others have spoken about how it is in itself rather a burdensome and difficult process to demonstrate and prove that a request is vexatious. This is correct, of course. Freedom of information regime should be applicant blind. It does become a little bit more difficult as you move into it, because as I hinted earlier, proving a request is vexatious can be complex and involves discussing the motive of the applicant. And more importantly, freedom of information officers and others that we spoke to and read up on thought that actually the term vexatious itself was quite difficult and problematic, because if you are engaged in a discussion with the requester and then you label their request vexatious, that often inflame the situation even further. And actually, it's for this reason that a number of information commissioners in the UK have said that actually they think that the vexatious section is underused in the Freedom of Information Law, possibly because there might be more convenient and less contentious ways of dealing with requests than this. Next slide, please. And in yet more kind of slightly less good news, despite the existence of the vexatious request section, there is still perceptions of a wider burden around freedom of information. And in fact, UK FOI officers had even stronger views that a small proportion of requests took up a great deal of time. 90% of them said that they had to spend more time with FOI requests, and almost 80% of them thought that a few requests take up a great deal of time. The estimates of how many requests were burdensome varied, but the average was around 20%. And it's also important to note that the effect of burdensome requests and also vexatious requests is very disproportionately spread. Central government departments, which are much larger, can deal with them much more easily than other smaller bodies like police forces and certain higher education universities, which have struggled with very particular kind of vexatious requests. Next slide, please. So here's the interesting part around solutions. Most of these broadly match with their colleagues in the United States about what kind of things they supported as possible solutions. The one interesting standout difference here is that UK FOI officers were much less keen on fees for requesters. And when they talk about fees, they're normally thinking about upfront fees. I'm happy to discuss this further in the discussion, but from my point of view, it seems that the Freedom of Information Law in the UK is, to all intents and purposes, free to use. There is no upfront fee for requests. There is the ability of authorities to charge for costs and processes, but that seems to be very rarely used. And I think more importantly, the debate about whether to introduce an upfront fee has been had on numerous occasions in the UK and pretty roundly defeated. So I think there is a kind of perception among FOI advocates and FOI officers that fees is something that wouldn't work as it should and won't really do the thing that you hope it to do. Next slide, Dave. Just finally, while we were asking these questions, we also asked a quick question about whether any FOI officers has had a freedom of information request that they thought was written by or drawn upon artificial intelligence. As you can see, around a third of FOI officers said yes, around a third said no, and almost 1 in 5 were not sure. And I think this comes with a pretty heavy caveat, which is there is no formal system for knowing if a freedom of information request has had any kind of AI assistance. So next slide. So just to conclude, when we did ask those FOI officers who did feel they'd had AI-assisted FOI requests, said they identified them in a few different ways. Firstly, they were identical or very similarly worded, or they all arrived in a very kind of short space of time. There was no sign that there was any tsunamis of AI FOIs coming in, but there was kind of surges around particular times, as you can see, during 24 hours or in a few hours in a day. In terms of volume, again, they seem to be pretty low. Estimates varied from 0.1% of all requests to the highest, which was 10%. And so far, and I think I do emphasize so far, FOI officers in the UK had been using Section 8 of the UK FOI Act, which means that a requester has to prove that they are a real person. So it seems that FOI officers were responding to these suspect AI FOIs by asking if the person was real, and if they didn't respond, then their request didn't have to be processed. Just two final thoughts on this issue. One is that FOI officers were also keen to point out that there was a positive side to the use of artificial intelligence. This could improve requests, make them more accurate, make them clear, and actually help them. And also, secondly, that the solution here depended very much on the quality of the AI assistance that was available, and that this could be a very different picture, even in a few years' time as AI improves. Thank you, and I think back over to Dave.
Sorry, Dave, I'll take this one. So in our work, we were also really interested in the Connecticut FOI Commission. It's an independent commission in which agencies would file petitions to sort of move that vexatious request or requester over to an independent agency for them to adjudicate how to manage this. So the law was amended in 2017 on a template from something they were seeing in Canada. The petitions, when they're filed, have to be very specific, explain why the agency needs relief, because they don't want this to be kind of a knee-jerk reaction to the average frustrating request. These petitions would not take into account motives or the level of distress. Instead, the agency has to demonstrate that there is a history of vexatiousness in the number of requests, the scope, the language, and a pattern of conduct that is abusive to the right of accessing information. There have only been a few petitions filed. In the very beginning, they were kind of unsure about whether there'd be this, wave of petitions from agencies, but there really hasn't been. And of those petitions, there are fewer that the commission then takes up for a hearing. But I wanted to tell you about two cases that have gone all the way through the process. In these two cases, requesters have been banned from making requests to these agencies for a year. So in one case, the requester had a history of repetitive, duplicative, voluminous, and harassing requests. And then in another city, the requester was labeled as vexatious because of his repeated requests that were deemed accusatory and offensive. So Dave, I'll hand it back to you to talk through some of the potential solutions.
Great, thank you, Shelley. And by the way, in Utah, where they adopted something like this, they also have labeled one person vexatious, I think banned for a year. Tennessee, where this was instituted, I believe hasn't had anybody, and I think that is being sunsetted. So, so this isn't widespread at this point, although in the last legislative sessions in the spring, we did see a half dozen proposals pop up, and I suspect there'll be more this coming spring. So more people are going to look to these kinds of solutions, especially given what we're hearing with greater use of like mass requests hitting agencies, particularly in Pennsylvania. That's becoming an issue. So this is only going to be an issue that gets a little more attention. So what do we do about it? Well, we don't know for sure, and this is a draft, and this is why we need your input. So tell us where we're going off track here, or tell us if we're missing something. But clearly, there's some ways I think most people can agree that additional training, not only for staff, but the public and requesters can help. So that's pretty simple. More resources, technology. It's interesting, the election officials said more staff was their lowest ranked solution. And I think if you talk to federal FOIA officers, they'd say it'd be their number one probably. Um, more money, more resource, more staff, particularly now where a lot of federal FOIA offices have been gutted. And I suspect the election officers, when they're responding to that question, were thinking, well, if I'm going to get more staff, I'm not going to put it to public records. I'm going to put it to real needs. So, but we're not quite sure. Certainly, the use of AI has a lot of promise in helping agencies streamline their search for records and possibly redaction as well. Proactive posting, of course, the more we can get records and data out there online where people can find it, it means we don't need to deal with requests and large requests. So we have to keep working toward that and improving our records management systems across all levels of government. A recommendation from the last FOIA Advisory Committee was that agencies have front-end discussions with requesters, and we think this is a great idea. In fact, it should be required by law, as it is in many countries. I think, Ben, in the UK, custodians are required by law to assist requesters in crafting good requests, and if they want it. If they don't want any help, then shouldn't be forced on them. But doing it on the front end, I think, just makes sense. We all make sense. There are different concepts we run across we're intrigued with, like express lanes and zippering. Express lanes, which we see at the federal level, right? Expedited review, simple requests are supposedly done quicker than complex requests. Or zippering, you have someone who's you've submitted maybe 20 requests or more. Well, deal with their first one, then somebody else's, then deal with their second one, then somebody else's, on and on and on. So there might be ways of processing techniques that could help. Staggered dissemination. So, hey, you want all this information? Sure, let's do it in phases, which, I think the courts already do. When someone sues for a bunch of records, often the courts will set up a timeline. Okay, get this batch first to them, and then get these records to them in the priority of the requester. So that has promise. We're intrigued with differential copy fees. There's a lot of debate here, and we're still wrangling this. We don't like fees in general as a solution for this, even though agencies rely on them for this. And we just don't like it because we see it abused everywhere. We see agencies using that discretion often to get inconvenient or embarrassing requests to go away. So perhaps we come up with a system where corporate requesters, they go ahead and pay fees for these large requests. And I think a lot of companies, from what we hear, are willing to do so. They make money off this information, so they're willing to pay for it. But any other requests that deal with the public interest, even first-person requests, records that I might want to get about myself for my own things, perhaps they should be free, as they're treated in a lot of other countries. And so I think that's something to really explore. And then finally, we do see value in an independent commission setup. Maybe not for banning or fines, that's still under debate. But certainly these independent commissions have a lot of value. Past terms of this committee have recommended independent commissions with enforcement authority. They could conduct the training. They could help agencies provide better technology. There's just so much benefit. And perhaps they can also not only step in and enforce the law, in addition to the ability to go to court, but they also could step in and maybe say, hey, this request is way uncalled for. This is way out of line, and there's got to be a better way. So we are intrigued with the commissions. I don't think I think there's a lot of possibilities. I think what matters, we think, is how you write up the criteria and how you implement it. There's also less favorable approaches, and this will wrap up here with this slide and get to comments and discussion. Again, not big fans of search and redaction fees. We think that's problematic in the United States. We're not fans of the vague laws that have been approved and proposed across the country to allow a custodian to ignore a request if it's unreasonable in scope or many other vague criteria. We're also seeing time extensions being put into law. There was one state that was proposing a time extension of 6 months, renewable. That is a long time, I think. Quotas and caps, we also think, are artificial and get in the way of valid requests that may be large but important. Fines and jail time, we talked about that. Some folks have brought up forcing requesters to sign affidavits that they are not doing this to harass, that they're doing this in good faith. That, of course, has dangerous ramifications of being weaponized. There's a growing interest in prohibiting anonymous requests or what's perceived as AI-driven requests. We think there's a lot of problems there as well. Most notably, I think there's a lot of confusion out there on what's AI created. In fact, as we talk to people who have been accused of doing this, we find that they're not using AI to send out 100 requests. They're just using scripts that they wrote, programming scripts that have nothing to do with AI, that have been around for years. So I think we have to really look closely at how this is being done before we just create laws banning AI or other procedures. So that's some of our thinking. And we really want to hear from folks. Where are we getting it right? Where are we getting it wrong? Feel free to take a look at those papers that we've written to this point. And then we're going to produce a final report this winter. We'll put it out on the web. We'll put it out for everyone to see. And then probably update it and as we get feedback and learn more. So thank you all for your time, and happy to open it up to discussion, and we will take notes and learn from you. So I don't know, Kirsten or Alina, do you want to be the moderator, well, the gavel holder on this while I take notes?
I'm happy to do it, but I also know you can do an excellent job. So
Well, it's very kind of you.
I can let you do it.
Okay. All right. Well, Margaret. Oh, and by the way, one thing I didn't mention, we do have a working group in this terms committee on volume and frequency. I should have, oh no, it's a subcommittee. Sorry. I should have brought that up. Shelley's on it. I'm on it. We got, who else is on it? Shoot, I don't have the list.
Nick and Nieva.
Nick and Nieva. And so we may throw out some recommendations for this committee to consider recommending to the National Archivist Congress, who, what have you. So I had to mention that. So Margaret, go ahead. Sorry.
Thanks so much. And this is just like such an interesting and informative set of findings from this study. So I really appreciate all the work that went into this and taking the time to present this to us. My question is about fees. So I think the word, this is because I think fees are just a really prominent part of discussions about reforming FOIA in the United States generally. And I've been in my own head, I come from the requester perspective. I don't like love fees, but I also sometimes think the word fees is doing different kinds of work. And I think one of the things that we might do is sort of tease apart what is the goal of fees, and then, what are the methods of, not just the amounts, but the methods of fees. So I'm thinking about this because, one goal of fees could be, as you've stated, in the course of this project, to deter, vexatious requests or whatever it is we're calling them now that isn't vexatious. And, it could be like, to try to cut down on these particularly burdensome requests. Another version of fees, of course, the goal could simply be to recoup a certain amount of cost that is required to administer the program, which, I would prefer we just fund it, but like I understand there's real challenges in terms of resources. So, or maybe there are other goals to be had out there, to sort of just I think charging fees to commercial requesters could be seen as sort of just declining to provide a public subsidy for a private business, right? Like we are just going to make that a net neutral. Like you pay your way because you're making money off of it and other people don't. Like we could imagine fees with different goals. And fees are structured differently. So like the kind that you're talking about that that I agree feels very problematic, and simply because, and I'm not saying this is an across the board thing at all at agencies, but it has the potential for being sort of abused in the sense of the way we tend to do it here in the US, where the fees, it's like you submit your request and then the agency says our estimated fees is, and then they come up with some like really staggering number, and this deters you from like pursuing your rights under FOIA or under state open records laws. And also the agency might come up with a staggering number because it feels staggering, and that may end up being true or not true, and the ways they estimate these things are not transparent themselves and those sorts of things. But the other way of doing fees is something that actually I think you've mentioned, Dave, which is like a fee per request. Now, like, I'm not advocating for this, but it's a very different model of fees. Or for certain types of requesters, a fee per request. Or after your first 10 requests, a fee per request, a nominal fee. That might actually have a really different kind of effect. It may do nothing for some of our high volume requesters who are well funded. Like, I don't know whether that would even do anything if it was $5 or $10 a request or whatever it is after your first 10 requests. But I just wanted to know, and so that was a very long-winded question, in which I'm trying to see if you all have thought about fees, like not just fees generally, but like the differing structures of fees and the different goals they might achieve, and how we might think about what are the most problematic kinds of fees, and are there any subsets of these kinds of fees or kinds of goals we're getting at that are either less problematic or even potentially beneficial in some ways. So thanks for indulging my long-winded.
Thank you. It's Dave Coulier again. Thanks, Margaret. Excellent comments and questions, all of which we're still debating. Suzanne Piotrowski has some ideas, particularly on a flat fee. And we'll get to Nick and Jason here. But Ben, I think it would be interesting. Can you chime in briefly about the experience Ireland had when it implemented a flat fee?
Yeah, so the UK hasn't implemented one, but one of the reasons it hasn't is because it had a lot of discussion about what happened in Ireland when they had a regime that was free, introduced a flat €15 fee in 2003 and kept it running until 2014, until a later government took over. And actually, Margaret, this goes to a lot of what you were saying here. There was some confusion about what exactly the government wanted. The government claimed to be introducing a fee to stop vexatious requests, and also we're talking about other concerns about archives. But the suspicion of some commentators is that they wanted to dampen down freedom of information requests. So did it deter vexatious requests? There isn't much evidence of that, but what it did do was actually lead to an overall drop in FOI requests by about 75%. When you count, this is when you count non-privacy related requests, because under the an instrument to function or do the things that you want, unless you just want to deter fees overall.
Yeah, and interesting, Ben, just to add, they got rid of it eventually, right, in Ireland, and it never recovered. Still, the journalists didn't submit requests. that kind of had a residual effect across the country. So yeah, those experiences I think are valuable for us to learn from. While like in Canada, they're passing flat fees left and right in all their provinces. So, but all of this is to be explored. So yeah, let us know if you have thoughts on that, anybody. Thank you. Nick Wittenberg.
Thank you. Nick Wittenberg. I had the pleasure of co-chairing the volume and frequency committee with the amazing Nieva Brock. Shelley and Dave, always love this and all the amazing work that you do, and it's great to have Ben with information. I hope he's heard of Daniel and Richard Susskind, who've done a lot of work in AI and the law. It'd be great just to kind of see the interplay potentially with freedom of information and kind of the technology. Obviously, I'm personally biased to using technology. I think Margaret at The Ohio State University pointed at this as maybe one of her points, but I think it'd be interesting to explore. Is there a possibility with fees to put into technology? Because I think as we're moving so fast, put the fee into training. I think we always have these amazing systems and not everybody has the training, and I know there's acts of Congress that what we can do, and typically the fees go to Treasury and Treasury happily takes that. But it'd be nice to improve that aspect of it, because Dave's amazing colleague at University of Florida at the College of Law has an amazing e-discovery program that has a number of top lawyers and judges at. And I think it's no surprise that Dave is at a great institution, and Shelley is as well. And so that's kind of my interest, is maybe this study could help, is how can we make sure that whatever the technology is, that folks, processors, and even requesters, have that type of playing field where they can get better access to education, in addition to the amazing programs that ASAP and DOJ do on the substance of FOIA, but just having something to kind of help raise the bar a bit.
Thank you, Nick. Appreciate that. That's great. Yeah, we'll take a look at that and see those issues, that nexus. Jason, you had your hand up earlier. Would you like to chime in?
Sure. Can you hear me, David?
I sure can. Good to see you.
Hello, everyone. Jason Barron, professor of the practice at the College of Information at the University of Maryland. I have 4 points. The first two, I really appreciate, Dr. Worthy, your comments, the UK experience. In the US, there's no statutory provision in the FOIA for vexatious as defined. And so there is a question on the table for this committee and for David, for your reports, with respect to whether a statutory definition is something to be considered. It certainly should be noted that there is none in the US. I worry about the law of unintended consequences. My experience as director of litigation at the National Archives for 13 years, and before that at the Justice Department, is that there were certainly some requesters who were making vexatious requests of agencies. That number was 0.1% of all requests. And so I want to be very clear here that I think on behalf of a public interest committee that it would be very narrowly defined in terms of a category in the US of what considers vexatious, at least on the part of some. And I would hope that people would at least note that point. With respect to motive, the second thing, Dr. Worthy, is that motive is not part of the American tradition of FOIA for 60 years. One can file any request and no one questions one's motive. There are situations with justifying fees or exceptional circumstances where you get into intention. But in the general run, agencies are not questioning the motive of people or the value of requests. They're certainly looking at other factors. And with respect to that, my third point is that there's a slippery slope here in conflating vexatiousness with a request that is unduly burdensome. I appreciate that you have done great work here in distinguishing those two, but those two categories are increasingly of concern to me as agencies confront the volume of electronic records that exist. For example, my favorite example is the capstone archiving that takes place, where in each agency, certainly cabinet departments and large agencies in this government, millions, tens of millions, and in the near future, hundreds of millions of emails are being preserved for at least 7 years for everyone's email in a capstone agency, and permanently for a designated number of capstone officials. If one files a FOIA request that has language in it which necessitates a search against capstone repositories, it will necessarily be the case that there's a large volume of records to be searched. And my concern is that the law has moved, I think, in the wrong direction, in that it used to be the case when I was litigating cases at the Justice Department that there was no cap per se on what constitutes a burdensome request or an unreasonable request. It's a search if it was reasonably described. But there are one or more cases more recently in the DC courts that would perhaps say that some number, whatever it is, 500,000 records or 1 million records or whatever the number is per se unduly burdensome. I'd like a conversation from this committee and maybe acknowledgement in the report that the absolute value of the number is not, unduly burdensome, and to recognize that in the future, increasingly, with as volumes go up by 10x or 100x at an agency, a greater percentage of requests will necessitate larger searches. And so to deal with this, we actually, as a committee, recommended last term in recommendation 2024-03 for agencies to engage with requesters who have arguably burdensome requests on agencies to do a sample, to have an iterative process. We set out a protocol for agencies to work with requesters so that it isn't burdensome on agencies, rather than a per se response in an initial determination that the request is going to necessitate a search of millions of records and therefore is burdensome. So I think that point needs to be noted. The Justice Department has repeatedly been on record through the years as asking for agencies to work with requesters, and we made a more pinpoint specific recommendation last term with respect to complex or large requests. My last point is with respect to technology. I put on my professor hat. It is the case that many educators are using technology to uncover whether students are submitting essays that were in part or in whole created by an AI app, whether it's ChatGPT or otherwise. And what I have to say about that is the state of technology, for example, Turnitin and other apps, is pretty poor, despite the vendor claims. It turns out that experiments have been done where people, like professors, put in essays that they themselves have written and are told that it's 30% AI. And so the false positives are there. And I want to note that going forward, that if an agency thinks that it can use software to detect AI in FOIA responses, there is a problematic question. And I think that might be noted as well. Those are my remarks.
Thank you, Jason. Those are excellent remarks. I've taken notes, and we'll definitely account for those comments, I think. I don't know, Alina, I know we're hitting up against 11. Can we go a little longer?
Sure. If the folks are willing, I think, yeah, let's keep going. I think it's great discussion.
Okay.
Does anyone have any other questions?
see-
Oh, Liz,
Liz,
hand is
yeah.
up.
Yes, hi. Liz Hebwitz here from American Oversight and a member of the public, the requester community. So I will be brief because Jason, I can't say it any better than you did, but just want to underscore a lot of what Jason said. And I wanted to, David, thank you for highlighting that staffing was not kind of one of the top responses among one of the groups surveyed, the election offices, and some of the reasons for that, because I do think, going back to the point, Jason, that you were making about the unduly burdensome requests versus vexatious requests and the importance of getting those definitions right. I think kind of when we're talking about the federal government and the agency part in creating the context of the burden, I think is a really important element here that sometimes gets lost. And I really do, Ben, I appreciate you also making the point from Ireland about the danger in approaching with too blunt an instrument for some of these problems that maybe feel different on the side of the FOIA offices than they look on paper when you look at the data, how many of these requests fall into these categories and what it looks like. So thank you for all of this. This is incredibly helpful.
Thank you, Liz. Yeah, definitely. And that is an important point you bring up, you and Jason. Some people could say, well, if it's just this huge request, it's going to take forever. They shouldn't have to do it. But no, there are times where the government should do it. The Miami Herald submitted, I think, 200 requests to the city of Miami, trying to get at all sorts of information that ultimately exposed widespread corruption. That wouldn't have happened if it weren't for their unduly burdensome requests. So sometimes, we can't just say unduly burdensome is vexatious and should be not allowed. So yeah, you're all spot on. And that's at the same time, how do you deal with something of that magnitude all the time routinely? Although we find it's not routine. Ben, go ahead. Sorry.
I just thought I'd add a piece of information that I know you like me repeating, Dave, which is, yes, the UK law has section 14.1, which is about vexatious requests. But I do want to tell everybody it also has a section 16, which creates a duty on a public official to, and I quote, advise and assist requesters with their requests. And this is the kind of flip positive side to this. And some FOI officers have said, actually, that's a key part of the Act too, that we have a duty to help the requester with the request when it comes in. And in some senses, that's part of this process as well, and a kind of really positive part of the UK Freedom of Information Act that I don't think exists in the federal level or different states.
And that's outstanding. And again, another recommendation from last term's committee. So very cool. I think Jason Leopold would appreciate getting assistance from the Department of Defense in crafting his requests. I think they should bend over backwards to help him. I'm sure they would love that. Sorry. Anyway, Mary Ann.
Okay, hi, I'm Marianne Manheim. I'm from National Institutes of Health and the Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute and Sleep Disorders. And so my question just is for you, Ben, actually. How many of these cases become lawsuits? And what's the timeline there? I'm just wondering, because what happens here is we cannot get to these in time because of how voluminous they are. We get sued on day 21 and everyone starts negotiating scope on day 21 because they don't necessarily want to even talk to us at that point. So I'd like to know how much of that is a part of this and if that went into your research as well.
Thanks, Marianne. I don't know the statistics, but what happens, the process in the UK is that a public authority issues a refusal notice under 14.1, and then it is up to the requester to decide if they want to appeal it to the two levels of appeal, and beyond that, it could potentially go to the court. So it wouldn't automatically become a legal issue because it's a long way up the appeal system. Some cases have been taken up, but it's not automatic and doesn't always happen. Interestingly, when a notice is issued, the public body doesn't have to explain why it's issued it, although the Information Commissioner advises that you do give reasons for your decision. So it isn't automatic, but it does happen. And then, of course, the question is that it becomes even more of a process for the public body.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you for that, all of you. I'm guessing we should probably move on. Alina, I assume. And again, please email, put my email in the chat, or any of us. Any thoughts, tips, suggestions, things that we should take into consideration as we congeal this over the next month or so. So thank you all. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate your time. Perhaps we could have you back in March after you've finished your paper in the winter and have you present on your final findings. I think that would be really fascinating. So thank you again. And Ben, thanks for your time. You're welcome to hang around and take notes about the rest of the meeting. You might find some of the other things interesting. I'm just going to poll our committee members. Anyone interested in taking a short break, or would you like to power through? What's the sentiment? Rick is going like this, meaning power through. Okay.
Power through sounds good.
Okay, powering through. All right. So at this point, we are going to hear from each of our three subcommittees to share the work they've been doing since our June meeting. Our hope is that the presentations will spark conversation, questions, and discussion among all committee members, just like what we've just had. I also want to direct everyone's attention to materials that we have posted on our website for today's meeting. In particular, a draft set of recommendations that will be offered by one of our three subcommittees for further discussion today. So first up, we are going to hear from Volume and Frequency Subcommittee, co-chaired by Nick Wittenberg and Yeva Brock. And Nick, I believe you're presenting, correct? We have lost Nick.
That is correct. And thank you to Alina for the introduction, and for Alina for that. So anyways, our Yeva's been doing a wonderful job as a co-chair. We've had a lot of different meetings about this. And I think what Dave and Shelley did was a wonderful way, I think, to dovetail into what we've been doing. And I think we want to use, best technology for our government agencies so we can reduce the backlogs that are out there. And so that's something I'm super excited about. And again, I think with the staffing and training,
Seem to be having some technical difficulties on Nick's part. Nick, when you come back, just come back on camera and let us know you're back. Can I turn to Shelley, who was going to present a little bit on some of the work that part of the subcommittee has been doing? Would you mind sharing that with everyone, Shelley?
No, not at all. Kind of carry forward with a little bit of some of our other tasks that we've been working on. So we are developing a survey for FOIA professionals to understand kind of the challenges of the volume and frequency of requests. And so we are in process of getting that approved and ready to send out. Of note, we did add a question to that will compare with Ben's work on AI and whether participants are receiving AI generated requests and how they know that they are AI generated, to help us pinpoint those areas that are concerning from the FOIA professional's perspective. But I see Nick is back, so I will hand back to Nick.
Yeah, sorry about that. Dropped out. But definitely I think I've had a wonderful time with our group. And I think it's one that I think we want to look at further. I think we had a discussion last week about potentially next spring doing another technology showcase, which would be exciting because I think technology is moving so fast. And then how can we enhance our government professionals in using those programs out there? Because hopefully, maybe it's a dream, but volume and frequency would be a thing of the past, because a lot of this is just data. And I think maybe, Dave, you touched on this, but we are, requesting information that is only going to explode with video. And it doesn't matter if it's from a FOIA, an Inspector General investigation, government litigation, or something like that. So how can we use all of government type thinking to help make this excitement with AI a reality for information that is open to the public, not classified, and not protected by the exemptions that are out there. So that is something I look forward to working with Dave and Shelley, who've been very helpful on our subcommittee, as well as with my co-chair Nieva, who we've been really looking at a lot of opportunities out there. And I think that's one that it's great to have AI and not have it burdensome that it stifles the innovation out there, so our government professionals can use it. Dave or Shelley, did you have anything additionally to add?
Okay, thank you so much. And Neva, if you have anything to add, please chime in. Otherwise, we'll move on to our next subcommittee. Just going to pause for a minute. And as I always pause, I want to just make sure that other committee members don't have any questions for this subcommittee.
Thank you, Alina. I have nothing to add.
Okay, thank you, Neva. I appreciate it. Anyone else have any questions or comments for volume and frequency? Okay. Next up, we're going to hear from the FOIA Statutory Reform Subcommittee, co-chaired by Ryan Mulvey and Whitney Fraser Jenkins. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Ryan and Whitney. You have the floor.
Thank you. So as a reminder, this was with the Ryan Mulvey, Americans for Prosperity Foundation. Sorry. As was mentioned at the outset of today's meeting, the Statutory Reform Subcommittee's principal purpose is to develop concrete recommendations for how Congress can amend the FOIA to improve requesting experience, to address agency processing challenges, and really in our modern digital world to achieve a goal of or to ensure that we're achieving a goal of open and transparent government. We have a number of draft proposals that have been shared with the committee, the full committee today, that have been posted in the materials section for the meeting. At the outset, I want to be very clear that these are not subcommittee approved recommendations, and they are not ready for a vote. We're happy to have conversation on the proposals now, I think, but we wanted to be transparent in where we're at. These 6 of the 7 proposals that you have come out of the Transparency Obligations Working Group, which is headed by Margaret. The other is one that was spontaneously developed and proposed at the subcommittee level, that's the proposal relating to making this advisory committee a permanent or non-discretionary federal advisory committee. So none of these, again, have been approved. We are still in the process of workshopping and debating and editing, and hopefully at some point soon we will be able to reach agreement as a subcommittee on what we would endorse for the full committee's consideration. But given the expressed interest of members in the past to seeing these ideas sooner rather than later, and particularly since proposing statutory reforms at this level of detail is something that I think is new to the advisory committee, we wanted to have those ideas out there now, so that anybody who's not a member of the subcommittee but would like to participate or otherwise give their feedback, that they could. So I mentioned the FACA recommendation. Real quick, I'll just go over the other 6. And then Whitney, if there's anything you'd like to add, you can do so. Otherwise, I'll just leave it to all of you to delve into the 7 pages of outstanding justification that we have so far been thinking about. So the first of these recommendations would be to expand the categories of records that are subject to affirmative disclosure. The second would be to build upon a prior and reiterate, I think, a prior recommendation of the committee to make FOIA logs affirmatively available. The third is to make reading room claims, to clarify the remedial authority of courts to order compliance with reading room provisions, so A1 and A2 of the FOIA. The fourth is to create incentives for agencies to find alternative ways of processing requests outside of FOIA. Fifth deals with 508 compliance, that's the Rehabilitation Act, an issue that has repeatedly been addressed by this committee. And then sixth, it has to do with what we've termed empowering agency officials, particularly with respect to posting in the reading room. So the details of all of those proposals and where we're at is online. The last thing I would just say before keeping quiet is that we have reached out to the implementation subcommittee because there had been an idea expressed at the last full meeting that we have a special inter-subcommittee working group, if you will, to find where there is overlap between these proposals and past proposals to make sure we're all rowing in the same direction. And I lied, I have one more point. There are more proposals that are at the working group stage, both with the Margaret's transparency obligations working group and Dave's working group on enforcement models. So those are still in the hopper. They will be coming, but we are always welcoming more members. Please come join us if you're interested in talking about these at a more detailed level as part of one of our working groups. Whitney, do you have anything to add?
No, I just wanted to reiterate that we really wanted to share these with the entire committee to get as much feedback as we go back and reshop some edits to make formal recommendations. But that's all I had.
Great. And I think it would be fair, since 6 of these 7 proposals are coming from the working group led by Margaret. Margaret, do you have anything that you'd like to add to before Alina opens the floor?
Yeah, thanks so much, Ryan. Recommendations for reforms to the FOIA statute that were out there. That included every prior recommendation that we could find from the prior iterations of the FOIA Advisory Committee, and that would implicate a statutory change, and also from other government sources like GAO, like the Administrative Conference of the United States, where recommendations have been made, including recommendations that come from bodies like ACUS that are, half government members and half public members. And then also from civil society and other legislative proposals that have been, introduced but not, or considered by Congress but not moved forward. So we really were trying to get like the broadest tent possible of all of the sort of reforms that were coming from these different sort of expert bodies. And then we were looking to try to cull those down to both a sort of like comprehensive in the sense of covering all of the major issues, but also what is really necessary and advisable. And so that's how we came up with these lists. I just wanted folks to know, this isn't sort of it's not like a pet project list of those of us who are on the working group. This isn't just ideas we came up with nowhere. We did do a lot of research and reading to sort of try to come up with a list, and this group represents about a third of our total sort of ideas in progress, which is focused as the document describes on affirmative disclosure as the major topic group. So I just wanted to describe the methodology so people understood where these things were coming from, and to the extent that they come from prior recommendations of this body or other governmental bodies, that's usually noted in the descriptions of the document itself. So thank you so much for the opportunity, Ryan and Whitney, to say something about it.
All right, I'm just going to open up the floor to either any other subcommittee members that want to comment or any other committee member. There's a lot of material there, and I know everyone has read it and memorized everything in the extensive written product. By the way, excellent written product. I just want to thank everyone for their hard work.
This is Kirsten. Frank has his hand up.
Oh, thank you so much. Frank was sort of in the corner of my screen. Frank, go ahead, please.
Hi, good morning. Frank Lamonti with CNN, representing news media requesters. I am a member of the QOCA working group, and I really just want to underscore the eagerness of everybody on the working group to hear, in particular, from the people that are watching this call that work on the government side. We're very mindful that some of these recommendations are ambitious and purposefully so. And we have certainly gone out of our way to be transparent and not to hide the ball in any way. We floated a draft version of these as early as our March meeting, and that version was posted in the meeting materials in March. We discussed them again in June. We are discussing them again in September, and recirculating an improved version thanks to input from a lot of the people on this call. And so my ask of those of you who are observing the meeting today, particularly who work on the government side, as well as the requester side, is please take advantage of this generous amount of lead time to weigh in so that we do not have any remorse or recriminations at the end of the process that people were surprised by the product. There should be no surprises. You know what we're working on, and we truly, truly are eager to hear from you.
Great. Thank you so much, Frank. Jason Barron, I see your hand is up. Go ahead, Jason.
Jason Barron, University of Maryland. Picking up on Frank's point, I was going to make the point that in the prior term, the committee did more than just an ask. We went out with a request to have the public at large send in responses to one of our recommendations regarding B5 and about initial determination letters. And we received many good comments from both the public interest community, and there were at least one or more from the government. I'm not sure what the process would be for government representatives, either on this committee or at large, to weigh in, whether they'd have authorization to do so on behalf of their agency. That's a question perhaps that we can have further conversation with offline. But certainly I would urge that the OJIS Ombudsman blog and in any other means that's sort of parallel to what we did last term to go out for comment on these what I consider very good recommendations, and I do want to applaud the good work of everyone on this subcommittee for that. And my second point is I want to take Ryan up on his suggestion that we work collaboratively with an implementation subcommittee, and I also want to extend the same invite to Nick and Neva. I think it's important for our committee to be hearing from the other our subcommittee to hear from the other subcommittees. That was envisioned in the first iteration of the recommendation for last term, which is to have kind of standing implementation subcommittee as a look to see what everyone is doing, what past recommendations were, and proposals. And so I encourage that dialogue. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much, Jason. I believe David Collier was next, followed by Nick. I hope I'm getting that order correct. Go ahead, David.
Thanks, Olivia. Dave Coolier, University of Idaho, or Florida. Sorry. Yeah, and great job, Margaret and Ryan and everybody and Frank that worked on this. Really astounding and so early on in the term. So thank you for that. And I also agree that it's critical that we get input. I love that this deliberative process is open and transparent. I can't imagine any government that would say deliberative process should be secret. So just an editorial comment, because this is how we find out how the sausage is made and how government works. While some people may want to submit comments, public comments, to the link that's provided in the chat by Kirsten, thank you. There may be some people who may not want to submit comments publicly, particularly government folks. Is there a way that maybe they have personal opinions about some of this that they want to submit to someone individually, say directly to Margaret or that sort of thing, that don't represent their agency's viewpoints, but they still, it's America, and they have a First Amendment right to express themselves. And if they want to do so, would that be appropriate, Alina, for people to just email or contact Margaret or Ryan directly, or Frank? And of those, who should they contact?
Great question. I don't think I've ever been asked that question before. And I'm going to ask Kirsten whether she can think quickly on her feet and say whether FACA, the FOIA Advisory Committee Act, the Federal Advisory Committee Act, prevents that from happening. I would imagine that it can certainly happen. We can share email addresses for everyone that you've suggested, and folks can reach out directly. I think that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, this is Kirsten Mitchell, the designated federal officer, and I agree. I think the question here is whether Margaret and others want their email address out there. I can't share it, but that sounds like it's doable. The other thing I wanted to say to all the people who are watching us on the National Archives YouTube channel is that I posted a link in the virtual meeting platform for our public comments. We welcome public comments at any time. The address is www.archives.gov/OGIS, OGIS/public, PUBLIC-comments. So you can, and it looks like Margaret has just chatted that she has no problem sharing her email, but she notes that she is also a public employee subject to state open records laws. If it's okay, I will go ahead and read out Margaret's email address. It's Kwoka, KWOKA.1, the numeral 1, at osu.edu. Thank you, Margaret. And with that, I'm going to be quiet and turn it over to Nick, who has been patiently waiting.
Before we get to Nick, I just also want to add Frank Lamonti just shared his email address. He's also happy to receive email. His email address is Frank, F-R-A-N-K, Breckner. David, you have to talk to him about that. BRECHNER @gmail.com. So I just wanted to make sure we got that in as well. And now over to Nick Wittenberg. Go ahead, Nick, please.
Yeah, no, I definitely think this is something that really speaks volumes to the advisory committee. We have an amazing professor from Ohio State doing some really deep work in this, and then Frank from CNN, a talented attorney, and then Ryan who's had a case in front of the Supreme Court. And I think that really brings some exceptional work to this. And I just want to underscore Jason's comment about getting together, a FOIA advisory subcommittee liaison, just so we all can kind of connect the dots. We can see, whether it's proposals or different things and how can we maybe, for example, volume and frequency integrate technology. But I definitely appreciate Jason's comment on that because that's really helpful.
All right. Thank you so much, Nick. Anyone else have comments or thoughts or questions? I'm looking around for hands. Other than Nick's, I think he just forgot to put his down. That's okay. Frank, is that you raising your hand or no? No.
It is not.
Okay. Just double checking. Okay. Well, I know that everyone's going to go home and do some homework and really thoroughly read everything that has been put out. Very, very grateful for the great work product. I know a lot of work and thought has gone into this. And as Ryan has pointed out, I think it's, ripe for discussion and a great opportunity to hone all these ideas. And there's more to come. The working group has definitely a number of other ideas. Ryan and Whitney, anything over to you guys? Anything else you want to add?
That's everything I have. Thanks, Alina.
Sure. Thank you. Whitney?
Yes, Alina, I don't have anything to add. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks. So with that, I'm going to turn to our final group, our subcommittee implementation, which is co-chaired by Jason Barron and Marianne Mannheim. So we are really happy to hear from the implementation subcommittee right now. Jason and Marianne, over to you.
I think I'll start off, Marianne, and please weigh in.
Okay.
I really appreciate the efforts that have been made by the subcommittee members to date. I'm going to defer first to Deborah Moore and then to Rick Pell-Steele to give updates. I'm going to weigh in on one issue and Marianne can weigh in as well with any comments. So Deborah.
Oh, sorry about that little technical problem there. Hello, everyone. I'm Deborah Moore. I'm the Chief FOIA Officer of the Department of Education. Thanks for the opportunity to update you all today on the progress that the Barriers Analysis Working Group has made since our last meeting. So a bit of background to get everyone back up to speed of what we're about. The goal of our working group is to uncover what's preventing federal agencies from implementing the FOIA Advisory Committee recommendations that have been directed at them for action. We've identified 20 recommendations that are directed to agencies, and we want to learn what can be done to enable them, those agencies, to implement the recommendations that they haven't yet put into place. We also hope to learn from agencies what practices and strategies have worked for them for those recommendations they've been successful in implementing. And as I've talked about at prior meetings, we determined the best approach for capturing this information is through a series of focus groups made up of federal FOIA professionals who have visibility on agency FOIA operations. We plan to ask them a set of questions covering which of the 20 FOIA Advisory Committee recommendations they have implemented and which they haven't, what barriers are preventing them from implementing those recommendations they haven't already put into place, what strategies worked or didn't work for those recommendations they've been successful at implementing, and what are some decisions, actions, or changes within or outside of their agencies that could help them implement recommendations. Focus groups will include approximately 4 participants in each group and managed by a moderator and a note taker, who are all members of the implementation subcommittee. Note takers and moderators will be trained later this month to ensure that we all are using the same procedures. So that brings us to where we are now. Since our last meeting, we have really concentrated on recruitment. Securing a sufficient number of participants is always a challenge for any focus group project. And we strongly believe that it's going to be very important to gather as many varied perspectives from federal FOIA professionals as possible, including those who are currently active in the field, as well as those who work in the field within the last 3 years. So we began building our outreach list of FOIA federal professionals with a full download from FOIA.gov. And from there, we cleaned the list of duplicates and outdated contacts and augmented it with additional contacts that OGIS provided. Thank you, OGIS. We ended up with a list of more than 400 unique email addresses. On August 20, we sent out the first outreach email to those on the list. And the messaging contains in it a request for recipients to also forward it on to others within or outside of their agencies who meet the parameters of the focus group. So we wanted to be able to extend our reach through that method. And then when we got bounce back messages, we used that information to both clean our list and also reach out to new contacts provided in the messages. We also conducted additional recruitment through other channels like LinkedIn postings and working with OGIS to have them further the message on through platforms and venues that they have access to. So our outcome, we are pleased to report that we received more positive responses than anticipated from our first outreach effort. We had approximately 45 people sign up within the first 2 weeks, which is really quite remarkable. Then on September 4th, we sent out our planned reminder email to those who hadn't responded. And as a result, we now have 70 FOIA professionals signed up to participate. We are extremely pleased with this outcome. Next steps, we have set up a working calendar of 14 focus group slots with moderator and note taker assignments, and we will add more slots as necessary. The focus groups will take place in the beginning of October and run through November. And we are currently in the process of assigning those who have agreed to participate to different focus group slots, after which each moderator will reach out to those members. That communication will contain their assigned date and time with an option to change if needed. It will also have in that communication, the list of in-scope recommendations and the list of questions that will be covered in focus groups. Then once the focus groups conclude, we will compile and analyze the data and then draft any recommendations we'd like to propose to the subcommittee for consideration. So just to wrap up, I want to thank you all for the time and also very heartfelt thanks to OGIS and to my co-working group members, Shelley Kimball and Sarah Wexler. Thanks.
Thanks, Deborah. Rick.
Thanks, Jason. I'm Rick Pelt-Steele, University of Massachusetts Law School. I'm going to share with you something that is not actually directly the business of the subcommittee, but I'll explain how it came to be. Right now, as background, the Office of Federal Procurement Policy, that's a tongue twister, and the Federal Acquisition Regulatory Council, FAR, are engaged in an initiative that the administration calls Revolutionary FAR Overhaul. So this is an overhaul of the rule book for federal procurement, which is a vast document. It's described this way. I pulled some language. It says this initiative will return the FAR to its statutory roots, rewrite it in plain language, and remove most non-statutory rules. In addition, non-regulatory buying guides will provide practical strategies grounded in common sense while remaining outside the FAR, the goal being faster acquisitions, greater competition, and better results. So it happens that in 2020, NARA recommended to Office of Management and Budget, which is receiving comments on the FAR overhaul now, to OMB that FAR Part 39, which I'll describe in a moment, be revised to recognize FOIA obligations, and that is to adopt system design specifications that facilitate FOIA compliance and search and retrieval. Our understanding also was that OGIS drafted a business case that was submitted to OMB in 2020 to recommending that federal agencies consider access in the procurement process again. And that was submitted to OMB with the intention of consideration by the FAR Council. And probably most importantly to this group, the FOIA Advisory Committee Recommendation 2018-03, which is on the website, specifically recommended transparency by design for when agencies acquire electronic record management tools, software, mail software, and related information technology. So the overhaul project is moving very, very fast. And by the time it came to our table in the subcommittee, it was, I think, a Thursday or a Friday. And it happens that Part 39 was on the table for the overhaul. And the comments for Part 39 were due on the following Monday. Now, Part 39 deals specifically and of a special interest to us with the acquisition of information and communication technology. So it was impossible at that very short turnaround timeframe for the subcommittee to initiate any action that would then go to the advisory committee and so on. Nevertheless, academic members of the subcommittee, who are Jason, Shelley Kimball, and myself, importantly, if less formally, Frank Lamonte advised us in this in his capacity as former academic, but couldn't be a signatory. But we also recruited the other academics on the advisory committee, namely David Collier and Margaret Kwaka, and we pulled together a comment on our own behalf as academics to advise OMB and thereby the FAR Council of Recommendation 28-03 and the related efforts that I described to urge incorporation of FOIA considerations in the overhaul with regard to acquisition of information and communication technology. So we submitted that comment to OMB on July 28, and I've copied that comment to the public comments, which are right now at the top of the OGIS list for submitted on or posted on 9/9. So if anyone wants to have a look at that comment, we also recommended that if, barring, given the nature of the desire here to trim down the regulatory requirements, understanding that in this way we're sort of suggesting adding something, but something that would increase efficiency overall. We recognized in our recommendation that it could be something that's incorporated into the regulations, or it could be something that's incorporated into these new ancillary instruments of buying guides. And either way would be a positive development. So that is something, again, it's not business of the subcommittee directly owing to the timeframe, but we took it on as academic members of the advisory committee in our own names. And I appreciate everyone who participated on a very first fast weekend turnaround to make that happen. Thanks, Jason.
Great. When those of us who are speaking done, of course, any questions to Deborah and Rick. I'll go next, Marianne, and then I'll give you the last word. Another topic that our subcommittee has been discussing, and which was discussed at the last public meeting, was the incorporation of a question to be retained in the annual Chief FOIA Officer reports that OIP, the Office of Information Policy at Justice, requires agencies to submit. Last term, a recommendation 2024-14 was approved, which said that the DOJ OIP should include one or more specific questions in annual Chief FOIA Officer reports, requesting agencies to report on activities that they have implemented consistent with selected FOIA Advisory Committee recommendations. Through the efforts of a former member of this committee, Bobby Talabian, who headed OIP until earlier this year, OIP adopted that recommendation, went forward. We are very grateful to Bobby and to OIP for doing so. It was included in question 12 under section 2 of the OIP report. With the last round, section 2 is ensuring fair and effective FOIA administration, and the and DOJ said in question 12 that the Federal FOIA Advisory Committee, comprised of agency representatives and members of the public, was created to foster dialogue between agencies and the requester communities, solicit public comments, and develop recommendations for improving FOIA administration. Since 2020, the FOIA Advisory Committee has issued a number of recommendations with a hyperlink to all our recommendations. Please answer the below questions. One, is your agency familiar with the FOIA Advisory Committee and its recommendations? And two, has your agency implemented any of its recommendations or found them to be helpful? If so, which ones? Our committee looked at the responses. There were any number of responses from agencies discussing their implementation from 1 to, I think the highest was 14 recommendations, but discussed in the report. There may have been others that were implemented. We believe as a subcommittee, as we expressed last time, that it's important for OIP to add this or at least to retain this question in whatever form they wish. I wanted to just put on the record here that point, and hopefully there's a consensus this time. And of course, if there are any objections, we certainly wish to know. We have not put it forward in a formal recommendation after informal discussions with OIP, since they're still deliberating, and frankly, we want them to sign off before a formal recommendation is had. We have worked very cooperatively with OIP in past terms. I've been a member for at least 2 prior terms, and we've always sought their input. We hope that we can continue to have conversations with them so that this recommendation could be formalized. Of course, we are not meeting again till December, and the next report is going to be prepared and put out. And so I'm speaking on the record here, and hopefully in a public way, to point to what I believe is a consensus that they should retain this question. I think there's a larger point that I just want to say in addition, beyond question 12, which is the mission of the implementation subcommittee is to ensure, or at least to find out and to make progress on how the government is implementing the 60 plus recommendations that appear on the OGIS dashboard and that we have had approved in the past. In past reports, there has been expressed concern that there are a lot of recommendations from this committee, the advisory committee as a whole, and going forward, there'll be more this term. And so I think it's very important to have some kind of accountability and oversight that is driven by this advisory committee, at least by looking at, reviewing, discussing, and finding ways that our past recommendations can be better implemented. The work of Deborah Moore and Shelley and Sarah on the working group for the barriers working group is really of paramount importance. I think it will be extremely useful in connection with whatever final subcommittee report we put out this term. And we will also be looking at the next round of CFO reports for this year when they are produced and published by OIP in the spring, to get a sense of where government agencies are in implementing our recommendations. And in what I will say, for my personal opinion, is a very difficult climate for FOIA personnel, given resources and everything that's going on. So I look forward to the work that Deborah, Shelley, and Sarah, and others will be doing for the subcommittee, and I hope DOJ will incorporate question 12 going forward. With that, Marianne, is there something else you'd like to add?
No, I think you covered it, Jason.
Okay, thank you. So, questions, comments?
And before we get to that, I wanted to give Sarah an opportunity to talk a little bit about the oral history project working group that is kind of loosely perhaps under the implementation subcommittee umbrella, or hanging out somewhere under the umbrella of the full committee. But Sarah, can I turn it over to you for a minute just to brief everyone on that?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Weichsel. I'm the Executive Director of the American Historical Association. The Oral History Project Working Group is exploring precisely that, an oral history project that would seek to preserve the historical experiences of federal FOIA professionals. This project would help us to understand the history and evolution of FOIA over time and serve to preserve institutional memory. The oral history process would be conducted according to the professional standards and guidelines that govern the work of oral historians. So our working group is now exploring our next steps, as this is not something that the advisory committee has undertaken in the past. But we are looking forward to having former federal FOIA professionals participate in the project and to sharing more information with the advisory committee as we get our work underway. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much. Opening up the floor to comments and questions for the implementation subcommittee. Margaret, go ahead, please.
I just wanted to say a huge thank you to this subcommittee for this really comprehensive and thoughtful approach to gathering information about this topic. Deborah, the sort of system you laid out, the amount of work that it must have taken to sort of recruit all these folks, this incredible series of live sessions, with FOIA professionals to discuss these issues. I just think we're going to learn a huge amount, and I really was just wanting to say that I think this is incredibly valuable, incredibly important, and I'm really grateful to all of you for your time. So thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? I'm just looking around for hands. I don't see any other hands. Okay, I also just wanted to add, a thought occurred to me as we were giving out email addresses earlier, and also to help Deborah and Shelley and Sarah's working group as well. Folks can actually also send an email to FOIA-advisory-committee@nara.gov. That's our committee's email address. If you're interested in volunteering to be a participant in the study that Deborah described today, please let us know in that fashion as well. If you can also send us any comments you might have in connection with the statutory reform subcommittee, that presentation that we heard earlier. So that's another method of reaching us and letting us know of your interest. And so for all of our federal friends out there that are watching us, thank you, Kirsten, for putting it in chat. And for those of us on the NARA YouTube channel, again, FOIA-advisory-committee@nara.gov. Okay, Dave Collier, go ahead, please.
Building on that, Alina, just asking if anyone on the federal government side wants to join this committee, since we do have some vacancies. Is there a call going out soon, or anybody listening, can they reach out to you? I'm just curious of the status of that.
So we're still waiting for to hear about whether we can fill. We've got, as we've talked before, we have 4 vacancies currently, and we would love to be able to fill 3 of them, and we're waiting for approval to go forward with that. We would put out a Federal Register notice and let folks know in that manner. The 4th slot is occupied by the director of OIP or their designee, and since there is no current director, that seat will have to remain vacant until that changes. So stay tuned. Hopefully we'll have more information on that soon. All right, just looking around, but really, really great discussion today. I am very grateful for everyone's work. I feel like I've learned a lot. I took 3 pages worth of notes. So thank you to everyone. Just want to pause for a minute and make sure no one else has any other thoughts before we go on to the last part of our meeting. Okay, all right, well, thank you so much. So we have now reached the public comments part of our committee meeting, definitely ahead of schedule, which is great because that way I can give the gift of time back to all of us. We look forward to hearing from any non-committee participants who have ideas or comments to share, particularly about the topics that we have discussed today. All oral comments are captured in the transcript of the meeting, which we will post as soon as it is available. Oral comments are also captured in the NARA YouTube channel recording and are available on the NARA YouTube channel, perhaps in perpetuity. As a reminder, public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. And at this time, because we're using this new Zoom platform, I'm going to turn things back over to Kirsten. And she will run things from here, I understand. Right, Kirsten?
Yes, thank you, Alina. So if you wish to make a public comment, please raise your hand so that we can unmute you. If you are dialed in through telephone audio, you can press *9 on your telephone to raise your hand and join the comment queue. Once you are unmuted, please state your name and affiliation. And as Alina said, you will be given 3 minutes to speak. So it looks like we have a commenter, Kevin Bell. Go ahead, Kevin, your line is unmuted.
Well, hello, everybody. It's me, your vacancies. Today's meeting opened, of course, with a comment on the Partnership for Public Services annual polling on trust in government, celebrating a new stratospheric 33%. And our challenge as administrative professionals working in the trenches is that, as the partnership acknowledges in that survey data, the public thinks that government means elected officials and political appointees, and that trust is how much you like them personally. This prevents them from fully understanding the role of the federal civil service and the work that it does on behalf of the American people and the FOIA experts within that civil service in particular. And I think that if they knew better the dedication that you all have to the work, if they knew the FOIA Advisory Committee and its government members the way that I do, that number would be much higher, at least 40, maybe as high as 45%. I myself have 100% confidence in the government members of this committee, however, to shoulder the added burden both in the committee, where they're increasingly outnumbered by public members, and their home agencies. And I dialed in today just to remind you all that you have my deepest respect and that I really appreciate the work that you're doing, even if I'm not there to say so as often anymore. Of course, a little over a year ago, I was sitting amongst y'all and convinced that I was absolutely in over my head. So if there's one thing that the last year and the last 6 months in particular has done for me, it was to cure any lingering millennial imposter syndrome that I still had lying around. So while I am sad to no longer be at the table, I am pleased to rejoin the requester community later this month with another former advisory committee alumnus, Ginger Quintero McCall, when we open our new free information group and put the committee's recommendations to the test. So I just wanted to call in and thank everybody for the dedication and hard work that still goes into it. I know that it's difficult balancing the competing obligations that you have as a government member of the committee, and I wanted to wish everybody the best of luck for the remainder of the term. It sounds like everything is really shaping up in ways that I think that at the time I was leaving, we were all hopeful that it would, but it looks like, at least in some respects, things are at least going to turn out okay for now. So thanks all.
Thank you so much, Kevin. We
Thank you,
definitely miss
Kevin.
you, and wish you the best of luck working with Ginger, who is also an alumni of our committee. She served on 2 different terms, so that is should be a great partnership. You'll have to let us know how you're doing on that score. Sorry, Kirsten, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but go ahead.
No. Yeah, that's okay. So it doesn't look like anyone's hands are up at the moment, but while we're waiting, I would like to remind everyone that they can submit written public comments at any time on our FOIA Advisory Committee webpage, and we can put we've put the link in the chat. It's basically archives.gov/FOIA-advisory-committee/public/comments. So please go to that site and consider written public comments. So I am looking through. It doesn't look like any of our attendees have their hands up. So if we just want to give a few seconds.
Sure. I think it's really hard to comment after Kevin presented such wonderful comments to all of us.
A hard act to follow.
Very hard act to follow. Don't be intimidated, though.
So, okay, yeah, I do not see any other hands raised.
Okay. Well, we do hope folks will consider reaching out to individual committee members as per our discussion today. We really value your feedback. We very much want your participation in the various projects that we are outlined today. So please reach out to us and let us know of your interest. I'm going to pause for a second just to make sure no committee members have any other parting thoughts that they would like to share. No, everyone wants to go to lunch, probably. That's probably where we're at. Okay, so I think we're going to wrap up this committee meeting. I want to thank all committee members for participating in our 6 meetings thus far. Thanks for hanging in there. A big thank you for all the wonderful creative discussions that have been going on among and between subcommittees and working groups. It is very evident that everyone is working hard and we're all determined to improve the FOIA process through proposed ideas and recommendations. So I'm very grateful for that. I also want to issue a big thank you again to our 6 co-chairs of our 3 subcommittees. And I want to make sure that no one else has any questions, but we will next meet on Thursday, December 4th, 2025. I believe that will be virtual, but we will announce whether it's going to be virtual or in person. I know there's been some requests from committee members to meet again in person. So we will try to see if we can make that happen. If I don't see any other hands up, I am going to wrap up the meeting. I want to thank all of you for joining us today. I hope everyone and their families remain safe, healthy, and resilient. And hearing no other questions or comments, we stand adjourned. Thank you.